I'm Max Mertz, and I'm chair. I had to make an unexpected trip to Seattle, so I couldn't be there with you in person. Without any further ado, if Sharon, could you make note of who's attending in the room and online? But if you wouldn't mind going around the table and just saying who's there, so I know it's hard to see on the screen here.
Kenny just walked on. Shelly's here. Deb's here. Hal, Joe, Gail, Maria, and we have Adam from LD Greenfield.
Fantastic, thank you. Approval of the agenda.
Ian Worden is here also.
Hi, Ian. So approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
And second.
Okay, so approved. Public participation. Is there anybody from the public here to join us? Seeing and hearing none. Approval of minutes. We have the December 15th, 2023 minutes. Does somebody have a motion for that?
I approve the minutes. Make the motion to approve the minutes. And I'll second.
Great. Those are approved. Audit presentation. Adam Sykes is in the room from the audit firm. Adam, we've had your draft and your full report for some time. I don't think there's a reason to go through the financial statements. You can talk about the audit opinion at a high level, but I'd like you to just give us a quick overview at a high level of the letter to the board, please.
Sure. My name is Adam Sykes, lead audit partner for the Bartlett Hospital audit from LG Rayfeld. And I've worked on the Bartlett audit in various different capacities over the past 12 years now. As Max had indicated, everybody's had a chance to review this, so we're going to keep this at a high level. And I've been told to try to keep this a little brief, so especially for at the end if there's any questions on the letter to the board. So we audit Bartlett. This audit is over the financial statements of just Bartlett, separate from the city and borough. We also perform an audit of Bartlett and their grants through the single audit with the city and borough of Juneau. We'll skip through the financial statements, except to say that the audit reports for both your audit report opinion was unmodified, which is a clean opinion, which is what you want in your financial statements, and the governmental auditing report disclosed a significant deficiency in internal controls over financial reporting, which we'll get to. But we did not disclose or identify any non-compliance in our governmental auditing standards report. Another item that we don't necessarily need to go into detail, but it is of certain import, is the implementation of a new accounting standard that occurred during FY23, which was GASB 96. Commonly referred to as SBITA, subscription-based information technology arrangements. It's very similar to leases, the lease standard that we went through last year. So if you were on the board, we went through that last year. It's essentially performing the same function on your financial statements, except for instead of for your property, plant, and equipment, it's recording assets and liabilities related to leased IT software. Essentially, that is subscription based. So on the letter to the board, there's a couple things that we disclosed to you. The significant estimates that are apparent in your financial statements that the board should take special care to at least acknowledge and take with a grain of salt when you're looking at the financial statements is management's estimate of the net pension liability, your OPEB liabilities, and the deferred inflows and outflows related to those, which are essentially assigned by the state. it's your share of the pension liability that the state shares, and whether that's in a funded or unfunded position, it changes your balance sheet drastically. We do the LG Rayfeld performs the journal entries to adjust your financial statements for them as a courtesy to management during our audit. And the result of that journal entry for this year was a reduction in your pension expense overall by about $15.6 million. So these liabilities and assets can have huge swings on the financial statements as they're presented. Outside of the pension estimates, there's also the estimate of the collectability of your patient accounts receivable. Your gross AR as you bill patients is valued by management as of the date that it's billed and sent out, and then throughout the life until it goes down to zero for both contractual allowances as well as self-paid bad debt expense that you can eventually have to write off. That's inherently an estimate that management comes up with based on historical trends and actual collectability based on the age of any patient account and by payer type, whether it's Blue Cross, Medicaid, Medicare, workers' comp. That's all factored into the AR model, but it is an estimate of collectability. Going to, we did have one of the newer items that we shared within our board letter to you is a disclosure of a delay in the audit process, which was a result of the implementation problems in the implementation of this new SBITA accounting standard. And I'll go into that just a little bit more here, but we just disclosed to you that that was cause for delay. We did not issue the financial statements until January 11th. Normally, we have the financial statements issued to you guys by the end of November. A majority of that, and I'm sure everyone's aware, was the turnover in key positions within your financing department during the course of the audit, and really not having the appropriate redundancies, skills and knowledge in those positions to really pick up where the work left off for that implementation. Outside of that, we've had no disagreements with management. We would disclose those to you in the financial statements or any problems with management. And we have no adjustments, material adjustments to the financial statements outside of what we do for your pension adjustments. So overall, the financial statements were very clean. Just took a long time to pull all that information together and get it ready for audit, really for us to dive in and make sure that it's all good. So as I had mentioned at the top, we did identify a significant deficiency in internal control over financial reporting. It's identified as significant deficiency 2023-01 in both the financial statements, in the schedule of findings, as well as in the board letter. The schedule of findings on page, I believe it's 45 or so, 44. There goes into a lot greater detail of the cause and the effect and some context of the actual finding, but what it really kind of boils down to is the lack of adequate resources and problems with turnover in key management positions in your financing department in order to properly implement this new standard. The standard itself really did not have much of an effect on your financial statements. It added about $900,000 of new assets and liabilities to your balance sheet. The problem really is that just like with the GASB 87 lease implementation last year, it requires a lot of work by management to pull all of that information together in order to make a determination whether is it going to have a material impact or not on your financial statements. It is something that management had been aware of. We had discussed it in last year's audit, saying, okay, we've just gone through the GASB 87 implementation. That was a pain. You guys need to prepare and get ready for 96, which is coming. And I understand that the accounting implementation issues could probably pretty easily get pushed down to the bottom of the pile, things to do when there are more important or immediate issues that management was having to deal with. Just at the time that we were scheduled to go through our audit, the work hadn't been done at that point, and then we experienced turnover in the CFO and controller positions. And we really, when we would expect to have all of this information ready for us to audit, would have been in September, early September, when we have our field work, and we really did not get the final numbers until late November, early December, which just delays the whole process. Outside of our significant deficiency called for internal control, we did have a couple items that we note as board letter comments that are more, it's not a finding, it's not a significant deficiency or a material weakness in your internal control. These are more items for discussion and possible improvement and efficiencies for the way that your financial accounting reports come together, really for your consideration mostly. But they do not affect the form or content of our reports. The first being, we noted that the hospital has problems and issues in dealing with the city and borough of Juneau with their interfund account. And it's been this way for years in the fact that your accounting department, you don't have your own bank accounts. So you can't really perform your own bank reconciliation. All the funds and cash are being held by Treasury over at the city and borough of Juneau. And on a monthly basis, your accountants are required to reconcile the amounts that is recorded over at CBJ with what you have internally recorded, and matching up, especially when it comes to CIP projects, items that they're paying for on your behalf or assigning to Bartlett needs to be reconciled with any items that you are purchasing or ordering on your own that has to be reported in both places. This is an item that we had brought up many years ago for consideration, and I believe Bartlett had brought that to the city and borough, and the city did not want to give up control over those accounts. I just, from our auditing experiences here, we understand that it is an issue that causes delay in the audit process. As the city can take a couple months past the financial statement deadline to get all of the invoices in and charged and properly sent over. So there's a lot of back and forth for a couple months after June 30th before you can really get a final number on what is your cash in central treasury for your own financial statements. And so we recommend that the hospital really evaluate the possibility of moving at least an operating cash account so that it's under the direct control and custody of your own financing department. That may require a change to the city charter or code, but it's something that it might be worth looking into. The city might always just say no, but it could make life for your accounting department a little easier. Our second recommendation is to review your AR valuation model as it pertains to your bad debt expense. And the way the model works is you have your, as I kind of explained before, you have your gross AR, and it's aged into buckets by payer into how old is the account. The longer that account remains unpaid, the less likely you are on collecting. And the contractual allowance portion of that model is pretty easy to calculate. You base it on historical claims and actual collectability. When you receive a payment from Blue Cross, they have a contractual allowance that they reduce and say, you booked it at $100, we're only going to give you 80, you have to write off on a contractual adjustment to $20. The remaining balance that is usually pushed either to secondary insurance or a self-pay account has to be further analyzed for what is actually going to be called bad debt expense. Out of the remaining 80%, what are we going to collect? And that model has not changed in very years, that portion of it. It's just set up almost exactly and identical for each payer. 10%, 15, 20, 50, 95, once it gets out to 150 days, with really only special attention kind of paid to the self-pay buckets, as those are inherently less collectible. And so the growing bad debt expense that you have resulting from the increase in self-pay AR kind of led us to question whether we need to go back and look at what is the actual bad debt expense on our collectability. It's within a reasonable amount. It's more, is it actually showing what we are collecting on an annual basis for these aged accounts? Related to that, our final recommendation for the current year relates to the self-pay collection process. We saw a large spike of AR, and a majority of the increase in your accounts receivable from prior year to the current year was a result of increase in self-pay accounts, and especially in your over 150-day accounts. Part of this has to do with towards the end of the year, I believe it was in May, you had contracted with a third-party vendor, which I believe is Early Out, that they were going to take over the collection process of all of your self-pay accounts. And in order to do that, you had transferred at the end of the year, basically all of the self-pay accounts, and they then began the billing process once again. And I believe they wouldn't collect on any of those accounts. They would give everybody basically an extra 60 days. It's not due now. We are now collecting on behalf of Barbara, and so you have 60 days to pay this, and then they'll start writing it off or sending the collections your way on those. However, that increase in the self-pay balance, because it is self-pay and inherently less collectible, and those accounts aged over 150 days, it caused an increase through your model to your bad debt expense, a pretty large one. And so our recommendation is really to continue working with Early Out, with third-party collection agency, to work those balances down. By far and away, your largest gross patient accounts is in self-pay, some dating back to, I believe, 2002. They're just heavily allowed for, so they don't really impact your financial statements when they stay out there. But reducing the amount of those claims, which can be problematic and time consuming for your billing department, which is why the move to the third party collection agency is really our recommendation, to work on that, as well as reviewing any practices and policies to try to collect on self-pay balances earlier, because as they get older, they're just harder and harder to collect on, to try to keep that gross AR on your self-pay balances down. The final item we have is a report on your prior year significant deficiency that we had identified, which is really a carryover from fiscal year 21, which was over your purchasing processes. Specifically as they related to your credit cards, there was a lack of current and updated and policies and procedures, and really a lack of conforming practice within the organization of how those credit cards are used, what they can be used on, and kind of the tracking and accountability of that. And we're happy to report that that issue has been resolved. There have been policies and procedures that were put in place late in FY22. And through our test work, we did not identify any issues in the credit card purchases as they pertain to the proper use, business purpose identified, and going through the proper channels, whether it's should be through a purchase order or really going through material management rather than a department purchasing an item on the credit. So we're happy to report that that has been resolved. There will be further results on your state single audit. The city's audit is still ongoing, and some of your grants would be captured within the state single audit purpose. Any compliance issues or findings would be issued within the report of the city and borough, which we're hoping to issue here, hopefully by the end of the month. So that's kind of my high overview of the board letter. I'll open it up to any questions you have.
Thank you, Sam. Questions from the committee?
I have no questions. Questions?
Adam, I got a couple.
Next, can I ask a question real quick for you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure.
I'm sorry. So, the PERS commitment or the other acronym, the OPEB.
Yeah.
So, and you said that we're off by how many million did you say? 4 million? Something like that?
It's not that you're off. It's that the state assigns basically a percentage. Here's the entire state's liability for the pension and OPEB payments that they're going to have to make out into the future. And some odd years ago, they basically said, well, we're gonna share that liability with the organizations that are partly responsible for that. And so it requires you to book. I believe your report shows you're about 1% of that total liability, and you basically record this liability on your books, and it from year to year based on the actuarial determination, which is also a year behind in their valuation dates, but they basically come up with, okay, here's the new liability for all of our pensioners that we're gonna have to pay out over the next 65 years or however long. And they say, here's your new share. You have to book an adjustment to true that up. And that flows through basically what is your expense. Some years it increases, and you have a less expense because the pension is more funded than it had been. Investments did well and the liability is less. And some years the liability grows, depending on really the actuarial. That's a big swing. It really does not have as much effect on your actual operations of the hospital. It's a kind of an arbitrary possible liability in the future that the state felt you would be on the hook for. And we have to record it for your financial statements to be in accordance with GAAP, but it really does not have an effect from a cash flow basis or from an operation standpoint with the hospital. It's just that on an annual basis, we true you up. As part of the
And I totally understand that.
Yeah.
And you answered my question. So it has something to do with like the markets if we did good or something like that. It's perfect. That was actually the question. Thank you.
It was just a very large swing this
So
year.
that's
Any other board members have questions?
Thank you, Chair.
I've got a couple. Adam, would you speak to the fact that when I look at the letter to the board, the interfund and cash accounts recommendation, the valuation model, self-pay collection process, I mean, those are issues that have been issues for many years. And so why are these showing up in the management letter this year?
So in talking with some board members and management, it was suggested that we beef up and include some items that would be, I guess, more beneficial. And even if, like if we talk about the city and the hospital cash account, at a certain point that was kind of put to bed. We had in multiple years of our financial statement recommendations and board letter comments. And management had basically told us, look, we've tried our best with the city, they're not going for it. And to stop, they asked us to kind of stop presenting that in the board letter. Some of the other ones, it could be that, yes, I would agree that some of these are longstanding issues that we probably could have or should have pointed out to the board. However, in discussions with management, a lot of these I don't feel the board is unaware of necessarily, but maybe pointing those out in the board letter would have put a little bit more emphasis on these issues to at least highlight and take action.
Thank you. And will the cash account recommendation also be in the city's management letter?
Yes.
Great, that's good to hear. The other question I had, well, yeah, I guess the significant deficiency on this for the SPITA implementation. Why, if the condition was the same last year when they implemented the new GASB 87 lease standard, and they weren't prepared for that one either, why didn't that show up? I mean, why are we getting a significant deficiency for SPITA, but we didn't get one for leases last year?
It was brought up with the leases with management last year. However, it really did not cause a delay in the audit process and the availability of the financial statements for the board and for management. So when we have this turnover and this pushback, it now becomes, instead of having a set of financial statements that you can rely on within 4 months after the end of the fiscal year, you're looking at the issued financial statements into the 6th or 7th month, which is not timely and really not entirely useful with later information. So the reason why it rose to the level it did this year is really the length of time it took to understand and pull the information together to get a functioning set of financial statements for you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I just have a comment for the group at large, or question for the group at large. Over the last year, and I think at the end of around this time last year, we had a conversation about engaging a separate audit firm, or having a separate contract with our audit firm to disengage ourselves from the CBJ audit. We have not talked about it recently, so I would like to bring it back to the table to see where we're at and if we're ready to actually do that. We've talked a number of times about the advantages and disadvantages of staying under the CBJ audit umbrella. I'm personally in the camp that they should be separate audits, that CBJ rolls our separate audit up into theirs. So, but
Joe, do you want to respond to that?
So when I first got here, the city was working on an RFP for audit services, and then they had sent an email stating they were gonna pull back on that and delay it 1 year and extend LG Rayfield for a single year. So I have talked to Max about, I'm gonna engage with Angie Fleck to make sure that as we go into the next RFP process, that our audit is looked at under a different lens, with some healthcare specificity in the firm that they're going after.
Joe, if I could just add, I mean, part of your reasoning for a rationale for extending for another year is the fact that you could very well be into an ERP implementation by audit time. And so it'd be a lot to lift to also break in new auditors, right? I mean, that
New auditors come in with the whole new lens, so you're getting 5,000 questions because they don't understand you as an entity. So the first time audits are just a heavy lift. And so if we're looking at changing things structurally or, looking at adding new accounting software and going through the audit at the same period, I don't know if we'd have the bandwidth to do anything really well if we tried to do it all.
Okay, but to echo Deb's point, so next year, there would be, what I'm hearing from you is you would work with the city to have an audit RFP, and the hospital's audit RFP would be separate from the cities. Is that kind of the direction you're headed?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any board member comments or questions about that?
Mr. Chair, I just want to echo my agreement with you and Deb, and I really want this to be in writing to make sure that the city is totally on board with this too.
Great, thank you. Adam, thanks for your work and your time. We know things have dragged on a little bit and it's a heavy lift to pull the financials together. So thank you, and thank you to your staff.
Yeah, appreciate it, Max. Thank you to the board.
Okay, let's see. Moving on, CFO report.
So November was my second set of financials, and as you guys have seen in the packet, it was not another good month, so we had a almost $2 million loss. We did some cleanup during the month. We had some one-time entries that we had to get posted. We had position contract moving along. We had some expenses that we had posted to contractuals. We had to pull those down below the line. So you saw our credit card fees, which was a big hit. And on top of that, we're working with the two different consultants. We touched base, looking at our past year's cost reports, the multiple different angles, leaving it on the table. What's the implications of looking more cost-based reimbursement? Is there different methodologies we should be considering, such as critical access? So they're kind of looking at the whole gambit. I was hoping for reports prior to this meeting, so I had something to share with you guys, but it looks like it's gonna be another month down the road. It is kind of a complex issue as they're trying to pull. They're kind of recreating the cost report, so it's kind of a heavy lift on their part. But I'm hoping to have something before the next finance committee. So I'm hoping to have time to share it with Ian Gover prior to that as well. The cash drive, we continue to see cash decrease for the month. Some of that has to do with the continual funding of Wildflower Court, in addition to the increase in AR. As well as the multiple other programs that we've started up, home health, hospice, crisis. So we have 4 different programs right now. We're not able to go across the board. On a positive note, we did have our site visit with Iridian earlier this week, and we're supposed to have our change of ownership in hand next week, so we can start the building process. The enrollment process is dedicated on our commercial payers for Wildflower Court, so hopefully we get that cash rolling in shortly. We're also looking at engaging with LG Rayfield to help us pull in Wildflower Courts and our books. So we have them all on our balance sheet, so there's some additional accounts that need to pull in cash. We have revenue in the calculus down, we think the last step that we need to go. We're also got the budget process kicked off. We have directors and managers pulling budget information, and we'll have that started. That should be turning it into once we start next year's budget. Any questions?
Questions of the committee?
I do have a question. If my memory serves, the statement for Wildflower Court still doesn't include any administrative overhead from.
That's just their direct costs.
That's it.
No accounting, HR, admin stuff. No depreciation. It's going to be one of the big expenses we will.
They look good if you. Yeah.
There's that caveat stays on the financials until we get that added in, because it's not really active.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, this maybe is kind of a silly question, and maybe you answered it partially already, but as I've sat here and watched the month, we lost $2 million, and then we lost another $2 million, and another $2 million. I'm thinking, well, geez, we need to do something. And then, but then I hear these reasons why that might turn around in the future. What I guess this is the big question. When can we expect to consistently sit here and not hear that we lost another $2 million?
I wish I had,
Hey, Hal, but
Yeah.
Joe, before you respond, Hal, there's a couple of kind of detailed questions I want to get through. This discussion you're opening up now is one we need to have, but I'd like to get through the detail first and then have Joe come back to the, the direction he and Ian are pointed on this. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am, thanks.
Shelley or Deb, do you have any other questions?
I don't have any other questions.
So Joe, I want to focus a little bit on the Wildfire Court AR. So have we collected $1 yet on Wildfire Court?
no. So until that change of ownership is approved by Noridian, we can't even bill, we haven't billed anything. So
Why
that's
is
why you've seen AR just go up every month.
Yeah, and I mean, that's big. I mean, while I agree with Hal of the alarm over the $2 million monthly loss, the balance sheet impact of the decrease in cash corresponded with the increase in AR is also alarming. How much of that, so when we look at the $26.5 million AR in patient accounts receivable, which is 7.1 million over prior year, how much of that is Wildfire Court?
Roughly 6 million of it.
6 million of it. And that is, that's acute. I mean, that's significant. It impacts, for example, our interest earnings right now would otherwise be very good if that cash was sitting in our bank and it was earning interest in the city treasury. So there's more harm being done to the hospital beyond just the fact that we don't have that cash. I'm very surprised that we're still sitting here at mid-January. We haven't collected a dime on Wildfire Court. What is the status on that? When will that change?
Well, like I said during my report, where they did the site visit virtually this week. So we should have that in our hands next week for Medicare. And then Medicaid, we have to reach out and engage with them to get that set up. And then since that's 98% of the billings, that's really what it's hinging. So until we have that change of ownership in our hands, we couldn't do nothing.
So it's the Medicaid piece is where most of that $6 million in AR is, all right?
Yeah, but they won't move until Medicare approves it.
I understand. So from where we're sitting today, then what's the timeline for starting to collect that
To
receivable?
get back to you, I mean, based on everything else, I'm not assuming it's gonna move real fast. I know all the billers got everything primed and ready to go out the door once we have our numbers set up and we're ready, we're enrolled, but I can come back with a better answer as a follow-up.
Thank you.
Max?
Yeah.
I have a question for the chair.
Yeah, sure. Shelley, go ahead.
How,
I know there's a deadline of when you can submit bills, so what time frame do we have that we would no longer be able to submit bills?
For Medicare, it's a year, and I believe Medicaid's a year also, and so we're not in any dire straits at this point.
I think that's all that I have currently as well. The swings in the contractuals, I understand that you're continuing to work on that, but I'm just not convinced that it's really a settled number yet. But maybe you could speak a little bit to that, Joe. Do you feel like we still have some uncertainty, maybe is a good way to put it, in terms of, what that contractual should be?
Yeah, there's a couple issues. There's a couple challenges. We have a growing Medicare AR. Medicare could be one of our payers that pays timely. We have to get off the books. That position has been empty for months now. We've got a single application since I started. And so we've reached out to a firm that, actually it's the firm that does the AR. They can provide Medicare billing services. So it makes that, in my opinion, it makes the AR allowance overstated because we have these older accounts. So as it goes up the brackets, it's showing as less and less collectible, but it really hasn't changed in collectability because we haven't touched it. And so I think the contractuals are overstated, but being conservative and knowing that as we get some of these analysis from these consultants back, that's going to show a potential increase payable back to Medicare. Our contractual is probably going to go up anyways. So when we had that one point, when we did our cost report settlement at the end of the year, we booked that with audit. I'm trying to come up with a monthly amount, so that's allowed for every month. So when we get to the end of the year, I'm not materially affecting our income statement with the cost report. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So there's a lot going into that all at once. And then we're starting to see our self-pay collection agencies actually starting to pump out quite a few accounts. So they're starting to turn that AR around quite a bit faster than they were. And so we're seeing some collections and we're getting accounts back to turn bad debt now as well. So I think we're heading the right direction. We just need to get see a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Deb, yes, please.
Yeah, this discussion brings up something else. Your memo on November's performance and the board comment talked about change to the allowance model. Have we completed that change? Do you feel comfortable with how the allowance model looks now, or are we on the road to that change?
To comment on that, I had tweaked it, so I did two different ways to look at it, just to validate that the model is accurate. And so I had tweaked some of those numbers that he talked about. I didn't tweak them the whole way because I'm expecting there to be some offsets with when I get this report back from the consultant. So I didn't want to say, hey, we're here, and then I have to swing it back the other way. So I'm waiting to get all the information and just give us a good up-to-date number when I get all the information. That makes sense?
It does.
I don't want to swing and look good and then swing it back the other way. and make
But
it
are you
bad.
comfortable with modifications that you're making to the model that going forward, we're going to have a more accurate reflection of what our allowance should be?
Yeah, so I mean, that's one of the things that I've always done as a CFO is like, you have to understand your model. That's when I first started in here, that's the fastest way to get fired is what my boss told me, is to mess up the model. So I made sure I was really good at that. To be blunt. So I spend a lot of time validating contractual model every place. So I've gone through our model. The contractual side looks really good. The bad debt had some tweaking to it. So we had to tweak some of those categories of collectability, but I feel comfortable where we're at. And then I feel good posting it once I have all the information. Thank you. I'll be ready for it next year.
Thank you. Okay, looping back, unless there's any other questions at this point. Looping back to Hal's question now. And I just maybe to kind of refresh our memories from and it was in our minutes from the prior month, but that we had this request from management that they were drinking from the fire hose, if you would, and that, Ian and Joe, and the fact that they were trying to, get their hands on what the, condition was first, and then figure out, what kind of short-term and midterm and long-term corrections need to be made. And so I'd like you to respond to Hal's question, but Joe, if you could maybe break it up and, what you guys are working on in the short term, and then some of the, mid to long term kind of structural things that you're looking at.
I just want to make sure, Ian, you want me to go over everything that we've talked about, or how deep do you want me to go?
Yeah, no, you can go as much detail as you want.
Okay. So in the short term, I mean, we've established an FTE committee, so we're looking at every single position that's posted at this point. Contractors, we're looking at what contractors we have on board, trying to minimize those. So me, Kim, and Chad have looked at all our FTEs, with salaries being our biggest expense. What positions do we need to have to keep our core operations in place? So that's kind of step one on the short term impact. We're also looking at all the contracts, service contracts, other contracts we have in place. Do we need all those? I'm looking at almost every expense. So we went through the cell phone bill. We're looking across the board for improvements in costs that we can cut today. In the mid to long term, we are doing, analysis of what can we do structurally to better our reimbursement for Medicare on the cost report. We're also looking at, almost everything. And critical access hospital, is that an option for us? What are the reimbursement laws for that? That's more long-term to next year kind of implications. We went through some contracts. We're looking at payer contracts as well to see if there's anything there. If we get more volumes. I mean, we're looking at all kinds of stuff. So I don't know how much deeper you guys want me to go. Is that kind of high level enough? Or do you want me to go try to stay out of the weeds?
Yeah.
I guess, Hal was the question asker, so let's turn it back to Hal. So,
Well, maybe that's all that can be said at this point. My question is really about timeline. As I sit here trying to remain calm month after month, I'm just asking myself, at what point do I stop being calm?
So through the chair, Max, can I jump in here for a second?
yeah, before we get away from that though, I think Hal, he raises a really good point, and I want to
address that too, so that's what it's.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Kenny, go ahead.
And then if I don't, please help me.
Yeah, go for it.
So I know that I've had several conversations with both Ian and Joe, both of them with their hair on fire, explaining to us what's going on here and what path what's happening here. And like Joe has really kind of said, he's really gone through or working through all the models on what we can do to, make our, reimbursements better, critical access or whatever we can do to make our payer mix better without doing anything hugely drastic. With that being said, nothing that they haven't looked at is really off the table as far as making sure that us as a hospital can stay viable for a really long time. I just want to say that the thoughtfulness and the way that they're going about it, the methodicalness that they're going about it, is you can definitely tell that we have two very experienced CEOs or CFOs in the room when I talk to them, as they're explaining, different ways that we get paid and different ways that they can change the structure to get paid. So I really think that they're on a course. So when you say a timeline, I would say that, if you talk to Joe wants the timeline to be tomorrow, right? and if you talk to Ian says they want to make sure I have, all T's crossed and I's dotted. So I really think that once we get there, that they have a really good plan. I think that then Ian and Joe are going to come out and try to educate the board on where we're going, what direction it is. But I would say it'd be in fairly short order. So I think I tried to answer that, Max. And Ian,
Yeah, and it looks like Ian's queued up here. Ian, did you want to
Yeah.
add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hal, you raised a really good question about the timing. This is what we've been doing. Is I think the first thing that you have to realize is that when Joe came in, just before Joe came in, we weren't even getting financial statements earlier than 2 months. And I think he's cut that down to maybe 8 days. Is that right, Joe, now, or 10?
And
So that's the first thing. The second thing is we started analyzing what's different now than it was before. And you have to put that in 2 big buckets. The first big bucket is the revenue side. And we started noticing with this big payable back to Medicare that our reimbursement isn't where it should be. And both Joe and I hired a company that'll do scenario planning about how to improve our Medicare reimbursement. And those results are not yet in, but they're expected sometime either today or early next week. That scenario planning will give us an idea of what we need to do to improve our reimbursement. So we wanted to go on the top line first, so we have more revenue coming in. The second thing is on the revenue side is that whenever you have a change in ownership, until you get your surveys done, you can't bill. So we are moving through those surveys, and we'll start being able to go and do back billing, which is allowed by Medicare. I'm not sure about Medicaid. Joe would know better than that in this state. But typically, we'll start catching up on the cash side of that. The third thing is how accurate are our financial statements? As you heard, the auditor felt they were fairly accurate, but that big payroll that came in had to be applied to the prior year. And so as we talked about that, Joe's coming up with a methodology to make sure that the payable back to Medicare is recognized on a more periodic basis, monthly or quarterly, something of that nature. Then, so that's one big bucket. What do we do on the revenue side? We're also looking at growth opportunities. We're also looking at, how do we get more volume in on a day-to-day basis, which goes to maybe some operational issues around OR. How do we improve OR? The second area on the top line is mix. So for example, with a nursing home, you have to manage your mix really tightly to be able to ensure that you can survive. And so I've given, Kim and I have given Kim Stout directions to start managing your mix, which means that we have to have the right balance between Medicaid, Medicare, and self-pay to be able to manage that. So on the top line bucket, there's a lot going on. The bottom line, the expense side, there's a lot of things going on too. The first thing is that I started musing about what was actually accomplished with this cost reduction that was done during the summer. And so far, I think it was paused during the summer because of all the turnover of the leadership. So I've asked Chad in HR to go back and look at how many FTEs we had at the end of the year, how many FTEs we have now, what's the number of FTEs we budgeted. We do know that from before COVID to now, we've grown a significant amount of FTEs. And when you look at your salary and benefits expense as a percent of gross revenue, it's much higher than your typical hospitals, which range in the 50s. We're in the low 70%. And so we know we have an FTE problem on that. So this is what we've done with the FTE problem. As we're analyzing it, we've put a FTE committee in place. That FTE committee is composed of 3 individuals. That's Joe, that is Kim McDowell, because she's the COO, and Chad, who is our senior VP of HR. They have kind of first crack at whether or not an FTE will get through or not. The ones that are getting through are typically substitution, i.e. we have an FTE that's working there and they are contract labor that costs us 2.5 times more. We would rather reduce our costs by substituting a local individual that will be here in the community and keep their money local and reduce our costs. I do have veto power over their decisions, but I would not be a good CEO if I vetoed everything they did. There is also an appeal process if someone really feels that that it's important to have that FTE. So FTE control and management is really key. The second thing about FTEs, I've asked them to go back and start looking at productivity levels. How many people should we have in our labor and delivery department when we have no deliveries that day, no scheduled deliveries? That's called core staffing. But how many do we actually do? So we don't have what I would consider productivity measures in a lot of our areas. And we have to do that. There was a study that was done, can't remember the name of the company, I think it was Health Trust, that did go through that last year. And I've asked Kim and the rest to start going through that report and coming up with productivity metrics. So managing of the top line is really key, but managing our FTE complement is really key. Then the next thing is contracts. I've asked them to list out every contract that we have. It's going to take some time because of our systems, and put them into 2 buckets first. Got to have, nice to have. And then local, non-local. I would rather, if it's nice to have, I would like to cut it. And if it's local nice to have, I might reconsider it. Anything that's national nice to have will be looked at with a very critical viewpoint of whether or not we really need to expend that cost. And so those are some of the major things that we're doing right away. We're also trying to quickly manage, for example, the crisis center, reorganizing that and structuring it so the amount of people that are over there match the number of patients. I think we've only had 3 or 4 patients so far, but we have a full complement, so we're managing that down. I'm also talking to others about how we can do more joints in the area. There's other things that we can do in terms of getting our volumes up, but I've had a brief discussion with 3 members about maybe having a center of excellence on bone and joint. They seem very receptive to it, but we have some operational issues in the OR to do. The other thing, we have to make tough choices about what we take on and what we don't take on. Should we take on a dental procedure and tie up an OR that I could do an orthopedic procedure in? Where every business I've been in, even though they're mission-driven businesses, there is a preference for certain cases over others that we might be able to move into maybe a procedure room or maybe a physician office. That includes eyes, it includes dental, that includes, podiatry, things of that nature. While we want to serve them, we can't necessarily take up the amount of space that we have and block out other things that are more important. So those are some of the things that we're really trying to do quickly. But I have to say that, we're kind of this year, fiscal year, because of the way we've organized some of our entities within the hospital, we're hurting our cost-based reimbursement. And we are working through how we might be able to improve that. But until they're not part of the hospital licensure, it'll continue to hurt our reimbursement in the tune of, millions of dollars, $2 million. And so we're working on that, but until we have our pro formas done and the analytics completed, I didn't really want to provide a full-blown analysis to the board on this, but it'll be coming to you, I would say, in the February timeframe.
Ian, thanks for that thorough response. I appreciate that. Hal, do you have any follow-up on that at all?
No, thank you. I put in my mind that look for more in February, and that I think that
Right.
completely answered my question.
We owe you a plan there, Hal.
Sharon, I do want to focus on, I had kind of one follow-up on Hal's question. Sharon, if you go to page 79, when Sam developed the budget for us, I felt he had a real strong basis for the model that he did. I mean, we went through it in some detail, and so the budget is meaningful to me. And interestingly, when you look at towards the bottom of page 79, the total expense line, it's kind of the third underscore from the bottom. Month to date is on the left, total is year to date is on the right. Compared to for expenses, we're pretty much right in line with our budget. I mean, we're right there. And so that seems to be making sense. Joe, the piece though, if Sharon, if you'd scroll back up just a little bit, what I'd like some more explanation on, not now, but if we could come to it at the as part of the February meeting, and if you wanted to, do a brief, 2-pager to send out to the committee beforehand, that would be great. But the total operating revenue line, we've got about a 4.5% miss right now against budget going on. And that seems to be driven by a gross patient miss, both on inpatient and outpatient at the top. And what I'd like is kind of an analysis of why, what is that? What are those deltas there? And I think it would help us kind of understand the challenges, and then also what you guys are doing to address on the short term, some of those top line revenue. But I do want to call everybody's attention to the bottom left-hand part of the page when we, and it speaks to the $2 million that Hal said. So the total budget loss, or the total actual loss for the month, was $1.961 million, the bottom left-hand number there. We had a budgeted loss for the month of $859. So I'm not trying to make light of this. I'm not saying it's okay at all, but we did plan an $860,000 loss. So compared to that budget, we're $1.1 million against the plan. And now we're $2.3 million off against the plan year to date. So while it's not good, it's still, there's a lot of challenges there. We do have to remember that, those summer months, May, June will hopefully, and even April will help us out some there. So, but Joe, could you respond to that for us when you, either at the next meeting or before, if you, have I know you're busy with other stuff, so.
I can pull something together pretty easy. Just on the
Say-
revenue. I can pull something on the revenue variance. I'm tracking it for a couple different departments already, so I just gotta summarize it for you guys.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Anything further on your report? Okay, hearing none. We are now to number the co-medical ED lights and boom replacement project, and I think we've got Kim in the room for that.
Thank you. So what you see before you is we put it as an action item for a quote for the ED boom light project. In August of 2023, it was noted that the booms in 5 of the ER rooms, which are the towers that hold the oxygen suction, has electrical outlets, has the big lights attached, were failing the hydraulics. Biomed and maintenance had worked together to try to fix those booms as much as they can. They are actually at end of life, so there is no more parts available to fix those booms, and they're essentially now just kind of slowly falling down into the workspace. As a result, we've had several injuries from that, patients as well as staff hitting their heads on those. So this quote is to talk about the cost of the project, and then of course we'll give the reasonings why that needs to be fixed. All parties have been involved: Mark Walker, Biomed, the ED staff, all the stakeholders. They looked at the construction, they looked at the ceiling, everybody agrees. The other thing with this product, we did do multiple quotes. This was the most reasonable one. When the original booms were put into the emergency department, they were actually set down from the ceiling too far, so people were still hitting their heads. With the untimely or timely replacement of these, they'll be able to set them up higher so that, you'd have to be over 6 feet tall to hit your head on those. And so whereas before it was a lot lower, so that should help mitigate that issue as well. There is a plan to stage these because they're in all 3 of our trauma rooms, and then our ortho room, and what we call our minor suture room. So it'd be a total of 5 that need to be replaced. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question.
Yep.
Big circle on here, quote expired in December. Are they gonna honor this quote going forward, or?
We have it up, there should be an updated quote, we have one, yeah.
And Mr. Chair, Kim, what was the life of the current ones? How long did they last?
I'll have to get that information for you.
I'm just
I
curious.
think they've been here, I would say 10 years. I started in 2015 and they were just original lights from then.
And that's what you would expect of these then?
Okay, so Kim, do you want to speak to your memo on the last page of the? Yeah.
Sure, And I'll have Nate and
Still too new. You don't know.
and Joe step in here as well. So the finance committee is being asked to approve the attached quote for replacement for the emergency department light booms that are currently in a repair state. And then to move it to the board for full approval. As I noted in August of 2023, the booms are failing. They're unable to be repaired. And due to that, they can't be moved out of the patient care area. And they're descending into the staff area as well as far as to treat patients. There's a total of 5 light booms, like I said, that would be needed to be replaced. Should be the updated quote. If not, I will send that to you. I apologize behind this. And so I'm just asking for kind of, permission to move this forward so we can get these repairs done. Any of the repairs that they're doing now with this boom project will not have to be retaken out or affect any future construction of the emergency department as far as the plans that Nate and I have been working on with the potential remodel of the space. It will not affect, so we wouldn't be tearing that out and having to replace it. They're easily can be taken down and then put back up, but they're not gonna have to be replaced as far as any construction goes. Appreciate that.
So Kim, just to be clear, on page 88 of the package, the pricing summary that's there, does that need to be updated or not?
Let me look at the quote, and the one that I saw recently was 218,000 and some change.
Yeah, that's what's in the packet on page 88, Sharon.
I know that according to Mark Walker, that does not include the electrical piece. We would be having to add that expense on as well. And that would be done by not through co-medical.
So do we have an estimate for that?
I do, through the chair, I do not have an estimate on that yet, but I think that the amount of electrical that needs to be done to support these is relatively minor. Because these booms already exist, the nature of the functions that these booms are going to support is not substantially different than what we already have in place. We would very likely go out through the city and get a term contract to perform any of that extensive electrical work above and beyond what we could do in-house. But I don't expect it to be a substantial cost. And we will get that information to you as soon as we have it.
Well, for purposes of doing this motion today, give me a ballpark, Nate. Just give me your best, even if it's a best guess today, just so we have something to kind of reference. Or is that an unfair question?
Through the chair, it's an unfair question. I'll throw out $20,000 then.
Okay, all right. So we're not
I
talking
think that's conservative, but
conservative to the high side or low side?
conservative to the high side.
You do, okay, all right. It's not $100,000 in.
No.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was trying to get to. Okay, so any questions by the committee? Hearing or seeing none, is there a motion, Shelley or Deb?
Actually, I would like to modify the motion to put a limit in there because there's an expectation that there's potential for an increase somewhere. And if we were, whether or not this includes shipping, so we'd have to add shipping to it and the electrical contracting. So I would like to put a ceiling on there, not to exceed on this, without coming back to the finance committee. And let's make it not to exceed 300,000. I mean, that's definitely on the high side, but we don't know what the shipping is gonna be and we don't know what the electrical. And my WAG on the electrical is a little higher than Nate's, but so. So if the rest of the committee doesn't object, I'd like to move that the PRH Finance Committee of Bartlett Regional Hospital approve the co-medical, actually refer to the full board, the purchase of 8, of the ED light booms all in. You can modify it a little bit if you, the language, but all in, including the cost of installation, shipping, and electrical not to exceed 300,000 with, coming back to the finance committee for review and approval.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you.
Kenny, what day is our board meeting again? I'm drawing a blank on that.
It's next Tuesday, Max. It's the 24th, I believe.
Okay, so we won't have, I guess the reason I was asking that is
23rd, Max.
Nate or Kim, we won't have information about shipping and electrical by then, correct?
Through the chair, I need to relook at the quote with my bifocals on, but it looks like shipping is included in that. I will verify, and just for the record, I'll have him send a quote with an updated date on it. So there's no question. And then as far as the electrical piece, I'll defer to Nate.
I think I can probably get that information by the time we would meet next. Oh, no, that's right. No way.
Yeah, I didn't think there was ways.
I was thinking
I'm comfortable. So to Nate, then I guess, Nate, are you comfortable with the $300,000 cap, given your wag about the electrical?
Through the chair, I don't know. I need to specifically talk with Mark about this. We just went through the drawings earlier this week and had them signed off. But in terms of the specifics of what's going to be required on the electrical side, they need to talk with them. Like I said, from my perspective, we're really talking about making connections. We're not primarily talking about making changes to electrical equipment like panels and sub panels. We're talking about making connections. So
the reason you're bringing this to us today, though, just to be clear, in the absence of having the electrical, is so that you can get the booms ordered, correct? You want to get this thing moving, is that right?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Yeah. So maybe, because it is, I mean, in all fairness to Deb or to Kim and to Nate, Deb, they really don't have, I mean, we're kind of pulling a number out of the air. I guess, how about this? How about if we approve the purchase of these booms, period? And then management will come back to us with an installation plan, shipping and installation plan. If that's exceeds, let's call it $50,000. So we separate the two so they can get going. And then we also do a motion that says, if shipping and electrical is more than $50,000, then come back to us and we'll talk about it some more. Is that a fair way to proceed? And Nate, how do you feel about that?
through the chair, from my perspective, that is a primary reason why we decided to do this. I think we do need to get going if we want to get this installed as soon as we can. I apologize for not being prepared to give you the more detailed information about the electrical costs, but I think part of it is, it takes some time to get those term contracts in place and scope those elements out as well. So, but that sounds reasonable to me unless there's any other.
So Deb, would you amend your motion to say that then?
I don't even remember what the first one said. Let's see. I will amend it to say, the finance committee approves the purchase of, ED light booms with the understanding that staff will come back to the finance committee in the event that shipping and electrical exceed $50,000.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Any further discussion? Okay, no objection? That we're done. Anything else for the agenda then? Joe, anything further? Committee members? Thank you very much. We're adjourned.
Thank you, Max.
Oh, yeah.